The first slave was brought to Jamestown in 1619. After 246 years in bondage, slavery was abolished by the 13th Amendment. Former slaves were promised 40 acres of land and a mule as compensation for their unpaid labor by the government. However, they never received this aid, resulting in economic disparity because of the presence of racism and discrimination. Despite the fact that slavery was abolished over a century ago, its legacy continues to have an impact on African Americans today. However, there is still controversy regarding how effectively this problem has been addressed by the government and those in power.
Following the abolition of slavery, the Black community faced discrimination that was detrimental to their social, economic, and political status, which impoverished them.
Look at the 13th Amendment. It says slavery has been abolished with the exception of anyone that has been duly convicted of a crime and is serving in involuntary servitude, which basically says that anyone who is involved in the criminal justice system is still a slave.
Discrimination Black Americans faced after slavery did not vanish, but rather changed. Economic ventures that African Americans took in the 1800s to 1900s, like leasing and sharecropping, resulted in widespread Black poverty as they were unable to turn a profit and often ended up in debt as time passed.
In addition to these problems, hate groups, such as the Ku Klux Klan, plagued the Black community in the 1870s. Conditions like these sparked the civil rights movement from 1863 to 1873. After making progress, like initiating the Civil Rights Act of 1866, the movement was interrupted by the Jim Crow laws, which were established in the 1870s through 1880s. These unjust laws provoked their civil rights movement that ultimately resulted in the Civil Rights Act of 1964.
Although the act was passed over 50 years ago, and African Americans are equal to white Americans on paper, elements of discrimination continued to impact them contemporarily. Cycles of poverty, a lack of access to education, and prejudice in job applications can all be attributed to the racism that African Americans faced in the past.
A lot of African American families face a cycle of poverty. Why is this?
Well, it goes all the way back, that African American families, since emancipation, have been denied the opportunity, for the most part, there are exceptions of course, to build wealth, to go to good schools, to enter the better paying occupations.
Like any other issue, the discrimination that African Americans face in modern society must be a concept that is accepted and understood by the government to effectively address this problem.
First of all, we got to recognize that if you take a legacy of racist policies and structures and you replace them with neutral ones, it's not going to lead to equality.
What kind of impact do you think the upcoming presidency could have on the issues we discussed today?
Oh, I think it could have a tremendous impact, particularly if there is a change in leadership in this country and a change in the whole political and cultural climate.
Government-funded programs like welfare have been shown to reduce crime rates, most significantly and positively impact children, and acts like a safety net in the occurrence of a sudden change, like the death of a family member. However, some argue that these policies result in a lack of work ethic and promote welfare reforms based on work requirements.
We've not done significant welfare reform since 1996. When we did welfare reform in 96, it was overwhelmingly successful for people on welfare, getting them off welfare back into jobs and back into society.
The Personal Opportunity and Work Opportunity Reconciliation Act was signed into law by Bill Clinton in 1996. This bill destroyed what was then the current welfare system and replaced it with a system called Temporary Assistance for Needy Families, or TANF. This new system encouraged recipients to find jobs by imposing work requirements and limited how long they could receive the benefits. This reform, while being detrimental to many by making it harder to receive assistance, has lowered the amount of people on welfare significantly, suggesting that the act achieved its goal. Despite this, some believe that reform is not enough, that welfare must be abolished entirely.
Well, the problem is that basically it provides a subsidy in a way that often interferes with people taking responsibility in good ways. That is, the question of getting an education, these sorts of things.
In order to further research how individuals and groups can bring about change in policy and social issues, we spoke with the former president of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, or the NAACP.
During your time as president of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, NAACP, what problems did you attempt to address?
When I became president of the NAACP, the recession had just started, and I said to our leaders throughout the country, we're going to focus on those civil rights issues that are right at the nexus of civil rights and ending poverty. And so we took on mass incarceration. We took on discrimination by the banks. We took on discrimination in employment.
Access to education, safe neighborhoods, and good nutrition are part of a human's right to life. Although some of the African American population has been able to overcome the disadvantages they face socially, economically, and educationally, it is a situation that needs to be addressed by the government through a cheaper and more accessible healthcare system, educational system, and financial aid.
In all, African Americans should be given further opportunities to recover from the 40 acres and a mule they never received.